Okay, greetings everyone. Welcome to this new ISV webcast series presentation on what Dynamics partners and users really think about ISVs. My name is Jason Gumpert. I'm the editor at msdynamicsworld.com and a partner at GuidePoint Media, the parent company of the site. And we're here today. I'm here today with two other presenters to talk to you about what we think is some really interesting and maybe even unexpected data about partner and user attitudes in the Dynamics space and how it relates to ISVs and ISV solutions. So just to let you know who's on the line today, along with myself, we have Marilou Barsam. She's a marketing strategist, as well as an author and educator on marketing topics. And we also have Greg Pierce, Vice President of Concerto Cloud Services at TriBridge. He'll be here to share a little bit of his perspective on the Dynamics partner and ISV relationship and his experiences in working with ISVs. So it should be a really fun, interesting, and like I said, maybe even a little bit unexpected look at some real-life sentiment and real-life data from the Dynamics community. So we'll be sharing both data from the research as well as interview findings that we conducted, both as part of the research and also afterwards. And I should just mention that the data you're going to see here is just really a subset of a larger survey that we ran between November 2013 and January 2014. And the way we're going to be positioning this data is around 4 questions here, and I'm not going to read them off, but we'll be getting into each one of these 4 questions, and that's how we're going to help sort of structure today's session. Just to give you a little bit of background on what the survey was all about, it was a reader survey of msdynamicsworld.com readers, and you can see here the respondents spanned across different roles, so customers, partners, consultants, ISVs, and a good representation across all the Dynamics products. We had 690 responses, 546 546 actually completed the survey. I'm actually going to just take a quick break here to just confirm that folks can hear me. I'm hearing a couple people asking about audio right now. So if anyone can just type into the chat just to confirm that they can in fact hear, and then we'll get going again. Okay, great. So other people can hear. So let's continue. Great. So before we get into some of the more detailed data, I just want to go over a few of the key findings that we thought were the most interesting, just to let you know what we're going to be getting into here. So, the first key finding that we'll be looking at in more detail: users are definitely investing, and it doesn't always depend on their partner engagement level. So how well their partner relationship is going currently. Second, online research rates higher than in person for many people right now. And finally, ISVs are helping partners close deals. What you'll see is some possibly surprising findings and some surprising sentiment from a range of different kinds of resellers in the Dynamics space, and it's probably one of the more complex areas that we're going to be looking at. So this first question, what makes Dynamics customers more successful, and also can ISVs play a part? So we wanted to take some of the data and the findings from our reader survey and sort of share those and try to make sense out of that question. So here's one of the questions that we posed to partners. Ranking the importance of these issues for your Dynamics clients, and the way to read this, sort of the top of the list is the most important issues. Going down the list gets of lower importance, and if you're going to measure that, the green part of the bar is going of each bar is going to be the place where the most important. So the first 4: user adoption, expanded utilization of existing software, data migration, and demonstrating ROI, tougher management. All things that you'd probably expect to be near the top of this kind of a list if you asked VARs what was most important for their own for their own Dynamics customers. But what I wanted to also show that was maybe a little more interesting or more surprising was some of the things that fell a little further down the list. So, for example, expanding a solution's capabilities. I mean, that actually was down here in the middle, and it's obviously something that I would think as an ISV would be an interesting point. And but it only fell one item below the idea of upgrading. So, just something to keep in mind as we move ahead, because I also want to cover user sentiment. And users really have a range of responses when you ask them how their relationship is with their current Dynamics partner. You'll see the 2 bars for each rating. One is from a year ago when we asked the same question, and then the blue relates to this most recent survey from November through November 2013 to January 14. The changes aren't all that big, and with only 2 data points, we're not really going to focus on those changes too much. But what you'll see, and what we're going to look at even more in the next chart, is that there's actually quite a few customers who do rate themselves either as having a poor relationship or no relationship with a partner right now. About 20% of respondents told us that, and those are again, our readers. Those are folks who are staying up to date on the Dynamics community, who are engaged to some extent, and who are filling out a survey about it, obviously. So, in case you're wondering who these people are and what their sentiment is by product, well, here's a look at that. And I guess the short summary of this is that the 3 ERP products you see here, very similar sentiments in terms of the excellent and satisfactory, and also poor and no relationship is relatively close in those rankings. Where you do seem to see no relationship more is right here with Dynamics CRM, and we don't have any specific findings on why that is right now, but I would sort of hypothesize that one possible reason might be CRM Online and the prevalence of cloud deployments, which could lend itself to more easily sort of becoming disengaged with a partner, given those unique engagement, the nature of those kinds of engagements. But it's something that probably merits further study. Where this actually gets even a little more interesting is this next slide. And this is where we started to cross-reference the rating of customer to partner relationship with investment plans for the next year. And so this takes a little bit of, you have to stare at this one a little bit to kind of get your head around it. But what I wanted to focus on first here was this top row. So for customer Dynamics users who say they have no relationship with a partner right now, they have some findings that I found unexpected. I did not expect to see in this dark blue here, which is much less investment. Well, perhaps that was one thing I did expect was they would be more likely to have less investment than someone who has a good relationship. But then if you look farther down here in the purple and the light blue, so purple and light blue here, those are folks who plan to spend somewhat more or invest somewhat more or much more in the next year. And that's actually the largest segment if you separate out those sentiments. So you see both people who have plans to spend more despite having no partner relationship, and you also see a lot of uncertainty. That's what the orange is on the right here, which, again, you might expect if you have no partner. You might have less certainty, less guidance of where you're taking your solution. But nevertheless, the people who aren't engaged aren't shy about planning to still continue investing in this solution. The way I sort of read the rest of this chart, as you get into people with poor relationship, you see still a high level of uncertainty, but a little less interest in increasing investment. And then as you get into satisfactory and excellent, what you see is a much smaller amount of uncertainty, but also kind of a broadening of the sort of keeping investment where it is, as opposed to raising the level of investment. So, I mean, this is a slide, or this is a chart where I think you could go into it and attack it from a lot of different angles. But clearly, there's some interesting things going on, depending on who you are as a customer and how your relationship is working as a customer. As I mentioned earlier, we also talked to some of the people who took part in the survey and asked them for their comments. And we got a range of responses. I just want to share 3 of them here just to give you a sense of what the kind of things people were talking about when they talked to us in regard to this. So, for example, someone on GP who said we've been on GP since the 90s, and the business processes have changed a little, but they're aware that there's probably functionality available that they're not fully leveraging, and I'm guessing they're right. You know, a CRM user said they can't keep up with the additional functionality. And then an independent NAV consultant we talked to made this point: customers aren't foolish. They say what they want from the system. Some know what NAV has to offer and have heard that it needs add-ons, while others can just tell you what they want. ISVs are there to provide certified products that work in NAV. So I thought that was an interesting one for this consultant's sort of very realistic view on these things, and I think it was interesting for his focus on really what customers are saying and his effort to listen to what they say and to try to analyze what they need. Okay, so I want to bring in Greg at this point, and this is a point where, Greg, I want to just ask you this question, given that data that we were looking at and some of the findings. From your experience, do you see any obvious gaps or overlaps in partner concerns versus user concerns when it comes to managing their dynamic solutions?
Yeah, sure, Jason. So, I think oftentimes when customers are looking for a solution, they are savvy and smart to the last point you made, but at the same time, they don't necessarily know what it is they're looking for. They know what their business needs to accomplish, and you can break customers into some different categories, right? There may be an existing Dynamics customer. There could be a customer who is looking to implement a software solution and they're comparing different pieces like nav with some competition. And in those scenarios, customers are usually going to understand, hey, I want to be able to get more information from a BI perspective, or I want to be able to connect to a certain system that's a public cloud solution. And it's up to us, I think, to be able to provide the customer with a solution that makes sense. And that doesn't start with talking about the specific software. It's a business conversation with the customer that then I think leads to the more specific conversations. But I think that, from a partner perspective, the disconnect sometimes can be if you jump right into a software conversation, you're not going to really take care of the overarching problem that the customer has, which is, how do I solve this issue?
And do you find that users, just as, if I could just ask you a follow-up, do you find that users try to jump ahead on that and try to focus on, do you have a solution for this that covers this particular piece of functionality? And do you have to feel like you have to sort of pull that discussion back a step?
Sometimes they do. Sometimes what will happen is, they know that there's 3 parts to the solution they need to look at, and they'll start doing research on all the 3 parts to pull together. And, some of the web research may look good for, a specific EDI solution to connect in, for example. And, through practical experience, we may know that it's better to go a different route or to connect up in a different manner. So sometimes customers will come with, hey, we're looking at, GP tied with X. I'm trying not to put any names in there because I know there's a whole bunch of different ISVs. But GP tied with X, tied with Y, and tied with Z. And you have to pull it back a little bit and say, hey, let's first talk about what it is you're trying to accomplish. Then we'll figure out the pieces of software that tie to it. And even tied to that, to make it more complex, a lot of the ISVs are on this call, could be engaged with the same customer in multiple platforms. So they could be looking at NetSuite, Infor, Oracle, SAP, Dynamics, but they may have an already connected third-party ISV provider.
All right, great. Well, let me take a step forward and look at a couple of other pieces of data, and then I'll come back to you, Greg, with another question here.
Sounds good.
All right, great, thanks. So we're going to step into the next question in that list I showed you earlier, and that's how do VARs approach ISV solutions and partnerships? All right, so I have another one of these bar charts, and again, you can read this from most important at the top going down to less important at the bottom. And the question is, how do Dynamics VARs evaluate ISVs and ISV solutions? I thought I'd point out at the bottom first because it might be one of the most interesting points. Financial incentives fell all the way to the bottom of our list when we asked partners what they thought about that evaluation process. Only a very small percentage gave it that very important in blue. Although it did have quite a few rating and somewhat important. And you can see the top few most important criteria were features, satisfaction of existing customers, license and maintenance cost and support options. And this is certainly something that we want to come back to, because I found this list, if you had asked me to rank it before, I might have come up with a pretty different looking list of what I thought might be the top criteria that VARs might rate there. And then we asked how partners approach ISV solutions, and this is something that, as you can see here, I mean, a lot of different votes for a lot of different approaches to it here, and this is something that we'll be talking about throughout the rest of today's session. But the top choice is we give all clients the reasonable options and let them make the choice. That's the most common response that VARs told us, and that held consistent between, you see the red is the most recent study, the blue is from a year ago. And again, this will maybe get more interesting as we get more data points over time, because we will be running these surveys every few months and asking some of these questions the same way, so hopefully we can get a good measure of that. But so second place was then standardizing on a small set of reliable add-ons. I thought it was interesting that so many, I wasn't surprised that some partners prefer to customize rather than work with ISVs. I was surprised that this many people selected that as a viable option. And then, obviously there's some negative sentiment too, and we're going to talk about that a little more later. That's a little bit more background on partner sentiment toward ISVs and ISV solutions. We got a lot of comments on this inside of the presentation as well. One VAR project manager from a Dynamics NAV VAR says, that sometimes clients push for a certain ISV solution even though it would be easier to customize, or vice versa. They don't want any ISV solution, even if it's a rock solid ISV solution that could solve their problem. Another CRM partner noted that they include ISV products into their CRM offering and don't even sell it as a separate product, and try to just give that single identity to what they're offering. Another partner said, I think there's an incentive as an independent consultant to bring an ISV to the table if they understand that this person as an independent consultant is out there, and this was actually in reference to the idea that ISVs not only engage with VARs, but they also engage with independent consultants who often have good access to the users, direct access to the users, or working with them in addition to a VAR engagement. So a range of different attitudes around how people prefer to work with and bring ISV solutions into the picture. And hey, Greg, I'd like to bring you back in now. So the question for you, do you have any suggestions on how you've solidified or improved relationships with ISVs?
Yeah, and I think it ties to your survey. For some time, I think that we were a little disjointed in how we looked at ISVs. We hadn't really put together a comprehensive plan going back a few years, and going back a few years ago, we started doing that. And I think it's important to have a standardized set of ISVs that make sense. And for us, it's probably a little bit of a larger pool than some of the other VARs because we've got over 3,000 customers and we're doing work in GP, AX, SL, NAV, and CRM. So there's different parts that tie to different solutions. But I think it's critical for the Dynamics partner and the ISVs to have good relationships and to go to market together. And as we picked ISVs to work with, what we look to do is expand the relationship, try to overcome some of the things I think that are seen from the perspective of maybe an ISV being a hindrance. I think that's crazy. I think if you go to market the right way, then the ISV is part of the solution. And if you look at it, I mean, we're doing a lot around cloud, and it's rid of that. I think it was quoted in there as Franken-ERP, or I think what they're trying to say is the Franken ERP type solution, where it's a whole bunch of pieces tied together. And the way to overcome that is to have put together with multiple ISVs and the dynamic VAR a solution that makes sense. And it doesn't have to be one that ties 12 different pieces together for some very obscure, not likely to, or not as common solution. But 2 or 3 together, I think, in a common manner can make that relationship a ton better. And I think that there has to be give and take on both sides from a perspective of sales and marketing and working together. But then there's also the part about tying together a truly unified support structure as well. For the customer, what does it look like? If you have a problem with Acme, then you have to call Acme, but if you have a problem with GP, you can call us. That doesn't usually work, right? It has to be some sort of scenario where there's an initial point of contact, and then it spreads out. And listen, I brought up one small ops piece, one small sales piece, one small marketing piece. There's a million things that go into it, and if you have an established relationship ahead of time, it makes that solution for the customer just that much better. I definitely don't see us as a group that thinks, gee, I'd rather build some capability into the solution than use an ISV. You guys wake up every single day and build this stuff so that it is the absolute best solution within that particular vertical or space. And I think if Dynamics partners do that, it just ends up watered down. There's going to be some examples where there's something that doesn't fit or something the customer is asking for that you just can't find, and I get that. But there's a lot of different quality solutions out there.
All right. Well, thanks for that. I'm now going to actually turn it over to Marilou Barsam for the next portion of the presentation here. Marilou, I'm going to take you off mute. I'm also going to give you control of the slides. And I'll let you take it from here. So are you there, Marilou?
Yeah, I'm here. Thank you, Jason. And hello, everybody. So for the second half of this webcast, we'll be looking at response data that's related to marketing efforts between partners and ISVs. Starting with this question. When looking for new ISVs to partner with, how do you prefer to search for them and their products? And what you'll see here basically is that in terms of rank order, predominantly the response sample is saying that they're looking for online content, white papers, case studies, webcasts, online directories, and websites. This followed by speaking with peers, which doesn't surprise us, and maybe a little bit of surprise and declining order are trade shows or in-person events and print magazines. In terms of comments that we got on the actual interviews, everything from, again, talking to Microsoft reps, speaking to people at ISV directions, customer referrals, Google search, YouTube videos, Microsoft Pinpoint, and again, referrals. Now, what we thought would be interesting and insightful for you is to now look at the response sample from the users who also took this study. And as you can see, the responses almost directly parallel what we saw on the partner side in terms of everything related to the net, online, being right up at the top, search, websites, followed again by reference to peers and colleagues, Dynamics partners, and then in the same order, conferences and print magazines. So there's definitely a trend here on both sides of the coin. Some of the commentary, I'd much rather listen to an independent resource than a sales pitch. Articles need to be unbiased. We want objective information, citing benefits or liabilities. We want to hear from experts. So something to keep in mind that when they are turning to online sources, this is their criteria in terms of how they evaluate whether the information they're getting online is valuable to them or not. So Greg, a question for you. What becomes obvious is that on both the user and the partner side alike, there's a growing preference for online sources. So what I'd be curious about is, are there any specific examples you can share with the audience today of online sources or materials that you have found to be particularly helpful when you are researching ISVs online? And then flipping that a little bit, in other words, where should ISVs be investing their money online to best reach you?
Yeah, I mean, so if we're looking online for ISV solutions, and I think some of the points you made in your slides are right. You know, there's going to be best practices, and we'd look at solutions that our consultants have seen as successful in the past. We'd look at the financial part of it. You know, all those things I think tie in the decision. If you look at the ISV landscape, just in the U.S., there's 36,000 ISVs that are Microsoft partners. Now, all of those are not Dynamics ISVs. Some of those tie to other types of solutions. And when we're looking for solutions, we're going to look for things that are specific not only to industry, but to Dynamics. So, you know, databases of Dynamics customers, which I think you guys have one, and those sort of scenarios, and some of the Microsoft, I think, parts that tie to showing us which ISVs make sense and which tie to different industry solutions, also I think would be places that we'd look. So, you know, if I were going to look online to go ahead and figure out where to invest my money, I'd put it in places that people are looking for dynamic solutions, or where specifically partners are going to look for Dynamics ISVs and not things that are more vanilla. I think you want to be as targeted as possible. Always better to hunt with a rifle than a shotgun.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. So in other words, you want to go right where that target market is and where it's being covered in terms of the editorial or the content.
Right. You know that you might miss a few ISVs, but your perception would be, if it's a large enough database, that you're going to miss obscure ones, right? Or ones that are kind of new to market. So, you know, I think it's critical to be out in those particular listings and databases.
Yeah, and I would think from the ISV perspective, your advice would make their efforts more efficient, because then they know that they're in the right environment online and that the right people are going to find them, people like you or companies like TriBridge.
Right.
Okay, so moving on, we asked a very specific example question regarding trade shows. How important is an ISV sponsorship of trade shows in shaping your view of the ISV's business health? And as you can see, the response sample is very interesting in terms of being a mixed bag, with about 1/5 of the sample citing them as very important, and then about 79 to 80% of the sample citing them as not or somewhat important. Some of the commentary: I never have time to attend trade shows. I wouldn't choose one ISV over another because they sponsored more events. Quality of product and client satisfaction are always more important to me. Attendance is important, not sponsorship. nice but not essential. Now, compare those comments with these. If an ISV wants to have credibility, they pretty much need to be at the big events like Convergence. So it's nice for ISVs to sponsor events to keep costs down. It gives me a chance to see them. It's still not a decision factor. Product's more important. Sponsors certainly get mind share at events. So we're looking at this from both sides again, Greg, and I wondered, our data is showing that trade shows certainly are still in demand and have some respect, but they are getting mixed reviews. Could you share your attitude toward them and how you find them useful or not useful?
Yeah, I don't think I would look at, you know, one of the quotes you had in there was that they thought that it was a matter of credibility. I don't think I'd agree with that. I think that what it is a platform for you to be able to advertise and to be able to get your message out to a large audience. We've seen trade shows be very successful for us, but you can't think of it just as a trade show. You have to think about it as an all-encompassing or not all-encompassing, but comprehensive campaign where you're going to have some press releases, the trade show actually connected to it, banner advertising beforehand, a lot of things that generate the message that you're looking to generate beforehand and that you can position in front of people. So hopefully by the time they get to the trade show, they're actually looking for your solution at the trade show to be able to talk to you. Now that's not going to be everybody, obviously, but you're able to get the message out, I think, in a much more comprehensive manner that way. And it should really tie to your kind of vision and messaging that you have at that time. Of course, it's a good time to talk about partnerships and forge partnerships with other companies that you may otherwise not see. But from a generation of business perspective, we've really seen when we tie those things together that it's a very successful thing for us.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense because basically what you're saying is not to treat them as isolated events, but to combine your efforts with online or press to make sure you get a lot of traffic and the right people there.
Right. That's exactly right. You know, if you do that, I think that then you have something that can really be a benefit to you.
Okay. So moving on, another controversial response when we asked, do you expect ISVs to be able to provide you qualified leads in order to drive engagements that use their product? And as you can see, amongst the sample, we have almost a direct 50-50 split here, which is very interesting. Some of the commentary, when we partner with an ISV, we try to make it mutually beneficial. We'll pass leads over to them, and we hope for them to pass them over to us as well. We need an ISV to work with us, to support us in deals and deliver materials. Some comments about making sure they treat customers right, and then our marketing director is always looking to co-fund. So in these two previous slides, there seems, again, to be contradicting attitudes toward the importance of ISVs supplying leads to partner pipelines. So, Greg, we're interested, of course, in what your take is on this. And do you have any philosophy or attitude about partners and ISVs working on a shared pipeline, and any specific ideas about that?
So I think that anytime organizations work together, if one can give the other leads or leads can flow both directions, that's going to endear you to each other, right? It's always nice to have. But I don't think it's the number one thing that is looked for in a relationship. You know, I think some of the other points that you made before are accurate. It's, you know, how good is the solution going to work, and what's it like to work with this group? Is it easy to work with them? Is it hard to work with them? And have we had previously successful engagements? I think sharing pipeline together can be hugely successful because oftentimes from both sides you look at it and you kind of think that you know what the other group does, but they do a lot more. I sat down with an ISV recently that we know for one different piece, and they do 3 or 4 other things that I think can tie into what we do, and we had no idea that they did those things at all. And being able to talk through pipeline, I think, helps flush those things out, because you look through the different customers and what the solution is and what they need, and both sides can determine that. So I think that's a very important part, and you have to get to a point where you have a relationship where you can trust each other to be able to do that.
Right. So, and it sounds like you're saying, it could start with lead generation, but then it has to get much more involved in terms of how you actually go after the customer and set up your whole process.
Right.
And related to that, we asked a couple questions about sales process and closing deals. So let's see what the sample said here. What are the most effective ways an ISV can support your sales efforts? So top ranking was by providing support and documentation, providing training to your staff, helping out with pre-sales efforts, some of which you just touched on, followed closely by providing marketing content and qualified leads. Commentary, I get a lot of inquiries from ISVs trying to get me to watch a seminar. I try to find time to do that to see if they have something better to offer. I prefer webcasts with a deep dive to learn what's behind the solution and their direction. So I'm going to talk about that in relationship with this, because I found it to be a little contradictory. So I'd like your insight here, Greg. So that was the attitude about helping with sales, all the way from pre-sales to support, documentation. And now, though, when we ask the question, how often do you involve an ISV to help actually close a deal, as you can see, we get that mixed bag again, where, those saying never and rarely is as strong, if not stronger, than those saying less than half the time and more than half the time. So I think the audience would be really curious about your take on that in terms of why those two responses are the way they are.
Yeah, I think some of it depends upon what the solution is. If it's a more complex solution, then oftentimes we'll have the ISV in the boardroom with us when we're final presenting. If it's something that we've worked with a ton and, we understand, then, we may not necessarily need to have the ISV connected on the call. It just depends on what makes sense. Though, I think you have to get to a point where you have a deep understanding of the software before you get to that rarely or less than half the time type scenario. And to me, again, the best group to talk about your product is going to be you. So the more that there can be an engagement where you get to talk about the things that you can do with that customer, I think the more successful you are. Though that it has to be presented as a unified front, right? You don't want to come across as being part of 3 or 4 or 5 different companies. It has to be seamless for the customer in whatever way you do that. So, one of the, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, like, making it almost seamless in terms of what the customer sees.
Yeah, so, I think one of the things that we're doing and that is a missed opportunity, there's been a little bit of it done in the marketplace, but a missed opportunity is to build out really industry solutions that tie together multiple ISVs with specific products and be able to have those prepackaged as much as you can. Obviously, you can't prepackage an entire implementation, but you can get maybe 5 to 10% of it put in place from a technical perspective, be able to demonstrate it to the customer, show them what it's going to look like, and instead of them coming and having conversations about which pieces of software are going to tie together, you have something, maybe even with a name, the professional services solution, to be generic, and it ties together the different pieces, and you have a shared sales methodology around it and operational delivery model, I think that that is going to be a solution that makes a lot of sense. I think as you look forward, the idea that software is better because it has all the stuff in it is going to go away. Cloud computing makes it a lot easier to pull together multiple applications and make it work because you've done it and it's reproducible. So I think customers are going to shift more towards a best-of-breed approach and wanting the best pieces and just figure that the integration is going to be seamless, as opposed to, you know what, I'll sacrifice 20% of the functionality to have something that, you know, says they can do the entire thing end to end.
Right.
Well, which I think is a good thing for ISVs, in case that didn't come through. I mean, I think it's going to be a really good thing for ISVs.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like really innovative thinking, and it also makes a lot of sense. And I'm sure that the ISVs listening are going to take that seriously. So thank you for that comment. We are going to ask you one last question. Are there any other marketing opportunities that you think ISVs are missing in the dynamic space?
Yeah, that's tough, right? Because you've got two separate sets of marketing you're talking about. One is marketing to Dynamics VARs, and then there's marketing to Dynamics. Actually, there's three: marketing to Dynamics customers that have a competing ISV, or are trying to use a watered-down version of functionality within the product. And then you have net new customers that may be looking at solutions, and maybe they're tied. Maybe your solution is tied to Dynamics and to some of the others all up. And again, I think that this ties to coming with a unified solution where even if you just take the VAR out of it, I think a huge miss here is ISVs working with ISVs.
Right.
And I'm not saying ISVs that do the exact same thing should work together. If you can, that's great. But ISVs that are going after the same sort of customers but haven't worked together, I think, is a miss, because, you know, it can defray some of your marketing dollars. It can lead to much higher opportunity rates, and then you can share leads back and forth. May also give you some more power when you're talking to the VARs, because you have an integrated solution between two or more different products.
Yeah, that makes, again, a lot of sense. I'm sure you'll get a couple of questions on that. Thank you very much, Greg. I'm going to now get up to the end of this webcast and recap, in addition to that valuable information and recommendation you just gave us on ISVs working together, unifying their own resources, being more powerful for the partner. That all makes a lot of sense. And then we have 4 points we'd like to recap from the research as well. We'll start off with Jason on the first two.
Okay, thanks, Marilou. Yeah, so the first point that I would take away from some of the data that we presented today, partners are receptive to working with ISVs, but it's a complex relationship. There's complexity between partners and their customers. There's obviously a lot of different considerations when a partner is evaluating an ISV, as Greg talked about, and as some of the survey respondents talked about as well. And really, I think focusing on, there's certainly some key or most important elements of what makes a partner responsive to an ISV's offerings in terms of looking favorably upon them. And there's also you know, some interesting dynamics to be aware of in terms of what kind of customers, what kind of Dynamics end users are going to be planning different kinds of investments, and how to gauge, you know, the likelihood that customers are really in the market for enhancing, improving their solutions, or if it's net new, to Greg's point, you know, having strong partners that you can rely on in that way. Let's see. So yeah, and then the second point there, Marilou. So build partner confidence with both marketing support and delivery execution. I think the data was quite interesting on that point as well. You know, as we saw from the data, the partners have certain high priority criteria that they look for. They want to know that ISVs have had success in deploying their solution and have had maturity. And what I take away, Greg, from your points is that the ability to build very strong, very healthy relationships with VARs is one of the best ways to ensure that that there's a relationship that has legs to it that can move forward in a productive way, and that comes again from going back and being able to demonstrate those qualities that both users and partners are looking for, and to some extent it also involves the health of or the interests of the customer, and whether the customers are looking to expand or have other key considerations in their own sort of enterprise software roadmap. So that's what I would take away from those first 2 points there, Marilou.
Okay. And then lastly, I think it became very clear through the response that there is definitely a demand for online marketing in terms of the relationship between the partners and ISVs and the users. And one of the things we saw is interest in online resources, whether it be a source, a community itself, or actual media like webcasts, white papers, seminars, in comparison to print and trade shows, which seem to be on the decline. A piece of advice I would leave everyone with is, if you're not already doing this, take that trending seriously enough to start putting resources and building a full content portfolio, so that you're able to speak to different users and partners based on their own specific bias in terms of what it is they like to download to learn more about you. And then the last point here, there's not real high expectations from partners for ISVs to always be there to close deals, as much as they are looking to some of the points that Greg made, looking for you to really pull your efforts and your resources, and with them presenting a united front all the way back to lead generation. And when you do that, to make sure that your product focus, you're objective about touting the benefits of your product, and that your mindset is to be as useful as you can be in terms of any of the help that you would give to the partners in the ways that they need it. And I think Greg was very specific in calling out what those were. So that's basically where we find ourselves in terms of our learning from the research. And we've got some wonderful insights from Greg from TriBridge as well. And what we'd like to do now for a few minutes is open it up to questions for anyone that has any.
Yeah, and Marilou, if I could just add, just to remind folks, this was a slice of the data. We will make this available to you. Just let me actually put up some contact information here. So feel free to drop me an email if you want access to these slides. If you want the full report, that's available to ISVs who have joined MS Dynamics World as premium members, and they get these periodically. We run them twice a year, and that includes a lot of more data sliced in different ways, but we'll certainly make these slides available as well, and we're happy to do that. We really do appreciate your attention today. If you have any questions on the data, questions for Greg or Marilou or myself, we'll leave the question queue here open for just another moment. Greg, as we do start to wrap up and take any last call for questions, I just wanted to thank you for taking the time to speak with us today and talk about your own views on some of these issues.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
All right.
Yes, thank you.
The session is also being recorded. We'll make that available to you all as well as a follow-up to today's session. And I think we will end it there. So thanks again for your time, and have a great day.
Oh, here's something. Oh,
okay. Let's take one question here. So the question, is there value in ISVs providing certification and training on their solutions? Yeah, it's a great question. Is that the one that you saw, Marilou?
I have a thank you.
Okay. There is a question on that, on value in providing certification and training. Based on the data, I would certainly say yes. That was one of the highest rated items for partners evaluating ISV solutions is certainly knowledge of the solution and ability to show that it's been deployed successfully and can be supported. And that's certainly a comment I hear frequently from partners, is that they want to know that they will be able to get support on those solutions. Greg, anything else that you would add on that question?
Yeah, I think it's a great thing to have in place, but it has to be fully baked. It can't be something where it's kind of just one or two things that are put together. It has to have value for the VAR, I think, in order to have that in place. I think what it also does is it helps force the VAR to engage to a certain degree, to be able to invest some time in your solution and get to know it better, and then to understand what the value is that's positioned for your particular offering, to get that out to their sales force.
All right, excellent. Well, I think we'll end it there, but I just want to say thanks again and have a great day.
Thank you.